Hello and welcome. You're watching Head to Head on UATV. I'm Oles Garjuk. The creation of an independent anti-corruption court has become a pressing issue in Ukraine. People have shown with their protest that the country needs a new institution to fight corruption, which is one of the issues that is straining Ukraine's relationship with the EU. Public activists have been stepping up the pressure on the Ukrainian government to combat corruption. One of these organizations we are happy to welcome to our studio today. Joining us is Anastasia Krasnosilska from the Anti-Corruption Action Center. Hello and thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
First of all, can you tell us a bit more about ANTAC organization?
ANTAC is an NGO, and we have two major dimensions of activities. First one is advocating for adoption and proper implementation of anti-corruption legislation. I am proud to say that we have been one of key organizations advocating for most important legislation within anti-corruption reform. In addition, we still have some watchdog activities, monitoring public procurement, public expenditures, and calling for law enforcement bodies to investigate in cases when we see some abuse.
Let's have more talk about this creation of anti-corruption court. Why hasn't this happened in Ukraine so far?
Because there is no political will. Why is anti-corruption court that important? Because right now the court is basically the final institution that we are lacking in order to be able to combat corruption impunity in Ukraine. We already have independent investigation, we have independent prosecution for cases of high-profile corruption, but unfortunately independent justice is something that we do not have. We see that NABU is investigating cases against very different people, against very politically influential people, but we see that courts basically fail to consider these cases in independent and effective way.
Why is this happening like this?
Because courts are not politically independent, and because most of the judges are simply afraid to deal with cases of high-profile corruption.
Do politicians have some interest in this?
I guess that yes, because we are seeing politically motivated decisions in cases of high-profile corruption. Probably just one example is a preventive measure for former member of the parliament and key donor of hugest political party in Ukraine, the People's Front. I'm talking about Mr. Martynenko, who is suspected in embezzlement of 17 million of US dollars. For that, as a preventive measure, he only received a non-financial bail. Ordinary Ukrainian who is non-financial bail, yes. Ordinary Ukrainian who is, for example, suspected in a theft of $5, let's say, he will go to jail for at least 2 months until the investigation against him will be finished. But Mr. Martynenko, for embezzlement of 17 million US dollars, only received a non-financial bail, which means that he remains free with all his money and influence to be able to try to settle the case against him.
Well, do you know who in particular is against of the creation of such a court in the parliament?
Well, right now, basically, the key role in this issue belongs not to the parliament, but to the president of Ukraine. Because
what would be the role of the president then? Yes.
According to the law, he is the only actor who can now submit a draft law on creation of a new court. And basically, the Venice Commission just recently recommended the president of Ukraine to submit his own draft law on anti-corruption court as soon as possible.
As far as I know, it looks like forcement to submit this.
Yes, but the president is not responding to this in a proper way, because instead of submitting his own draft law, he called for the parliament to create a working group and to try to develop the concept of the law in the parliament. This is just another tactic to postpone adoption and even submission of this law, because in the parliament, basically, the working group can take years or even more to develop just a concept. But right now, we do not need a concept. Recommendations of the Venice Commission are very precise. The Venice Commission basically, yes, outlined the model of anti-corruption court for Ukraine. So now it's no longer the issue of concept, but the issue of legal techniques of simply drafting the law and presenting it to the parliament. I would like also to remind that all other draft laws on judicial reform were developed in presidential administration, submitted by the president without any working groups in the parliament, and basically these laws were adopted in the parliament in a very expeditious, so to say, way, should there be political will from the president. But now we see that the president simply does not want to do it quickly and is using a number of techniques to postpone the issue.
What can public activists do about it?
Well, right now, our key demand is for the president, and we put political responsibility for any postponements with anti-corruption court directly on the president of Ukraine. Now the ball is on his side, and he is responsible for resolving this issue quickly.
Also, we are seeing the issue with activity against anti-corruption activists and organizations such as yours. For example, your founder, Vitaly Shabunin, is facing some charges. So what are the challenges of the activists who are fighting the corruption in Ukraine?
Well, unfortunately, right now, anti-corruption activists in Ukraine are facing, I would say, political persecutions. NGOs working on national level are facing legal persecutions and defamation campaign. But much worse is the position of anti-corruption activists on local level. They are not just legally persecuted, they are physically harassed, they are beaten, they spend weeks in hospitals after being severely beaten. And as far as we know, no one in law enforcement bodies basically is trying to investigate these cases. On the other hand, we are having a criminal investigations against us. For example, we have a criminal case investigated by tax authorities against our organization, ANTAC.
Yes.
Tax authorities are not informing us what are the accusations against us. So we think that they are using this criminal case as a legal opportunity to get access to our financial information, which is then leaked on internet, and to have an opportunity to legally wiretape our conversations. We know that this is happening in our office and through our private cell phones.
So this is like kind of some warning to stop. So this is
probably so, and there is also a huge public defamation campaign when politicians are trying to divert public attention from their ill-gotten assets to our assets, but unfortunately for them, our assets are not as great to be able to turn public attention to them.
Well, this sounds very sad, but are there at least any positive changes, some achievements that can mean some changes in Ukraine?
Basically, yes, we are very happy with how National Anti-Corruption Bureau of Ukraine is operating. It's important to understand that 3 years ago, politically independent investigations against top officials, members of the parliament, ministers and deputy ministers, this has been impossible. Now, with creation of National Anti-Corruption Bureau, we are seeing effective, timely and politically independent investigations against high-profile officials, and we are hoping that with creation of anti-corruption court, these officials will be brought to real liability.
And what would your advice be to the international community as it looks at Ukraine's struggle with corruption?
Right now, it is very important to deliver the message to the president of Ukraine that he is the one who is supposed to submit the draft law on anti-corruption court, and that any postponement, any attempt to create a working group and to work for ages is not acceptable.
This is a very interesting conversation, but that's unfortunately all the time we have for right now. So thank you so much for this conversation.
Thank you.
Today we spoke with Anastasia Krasnosilska from the Anti-Corruption Action Center. Thank you for watching Head to Head. I'm Alex Gerjuk. Goodbye.